At 23:45 on the 19th of October, 1942, Lieutenant Robert Lynch crouched behind PT-48's wheel. 3 Japanese barges cut through black water off Cape Esperance. Lynch had 4 Mark 8 torpedoes. Each torpedo weighed 2,000 pounds and required 10 feet of water depth. The Japanese barges drew 5 feet. His torpedoes would pass directly underneath them by mid. October 1942, Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3 had lost 6 boats. 17 sailors had died. The pattern remained simple and deadly. PT boats detected Japanese barge convoys. PT boats attempted torpedo runs. The torpedoes missed. The barges returned fire with Type 92 machine guns. PT boats withdrew or burned. The twin 50 caliber Browning machine guns on PT-48 could fire 850 rounds per M in Ute against wooden fishing boats. Devastating. Against armored Daihatsu barges, ineffective. The 50 caliber rounds sparked off quarter-inch steel plate and accomplished nothing. Japanese forces ran supply missions down the slot every night. When American aircraft made destroyer runs too dangerous, the Japanese switched to barges. Slower, smaller, harder to detect, immune to PT boat torpedoes. Squadron commanders at Tulagi were desperate for solutions. Some crews mounted single-shot Army M337mm anti-tank guns on their bows. They removed the wheels and lashed the guns to timber planks, one-shot manual reload. Better than nothing, but not sustainable. Lieutenant John Kennedy's PT-109 mounted an M3 anti-tank gun in August. The gun worked sort of. Kennedy's crew could fire 1 round, then reload manually, while Japanese machine guns raked the boat. The real problem was mathematics. A Daihatsu barge could carry 60 fully armed troops or 8 tons of supplies. The Japanese ran 20 to 30 barges per night past Guadalcanal. PT boats needed to sink multiple barges per Pascal troll to disrupt supply lines. Single-shot guns could not accomplish that mission. Henderson Field sat 3 miles inland from Lunga Point. Marines had captured the airfield on the 7th of August. By October, the field resembled a graveyard. Wrecked aircraft lined the runway apron. Japanese bombing raids hit Henderson almost daily. Betty bombers and Zero fighters attacked. The Americans scrambled everything flyable. P-400 Airacobras, F-4F Wildcats. Damaged aircraft crashed on landing. Some burned. Some simply died. Dozens of Bell P-39 Airacobra fighters sat in pieces around Henderson Field. The Airacobra was a strange aircraft. The engine sat behind the pilot. The propeller shaft ran under the cockpit. This unusual design created space in the nose for something remarkable. A 37mm Oldsmobile M4 automatic cannon firing through the propeller hub. The M4 cannon could fire 150 rounds per M in Ute, 30 rounds per H Orseshoe, shaped magazine. Muzzle velocity of 2,000 feet per second. The cannon was designed to destroy light armor and aircraft. High explosive rounds, armor, piercing rounds, devastating firepower. Most P-39 wrecks at Henderson were total losses. Engines seized, wings sheared off, fuselages broken. But the cannons remained intact. Hydraulic recoil systems, feed mechanisms, barrel assemblies, everything needed to make them work. On the 20th of October, Lynch walked Henderson Field at dawn. He counted 23 wrecked Airacobras. Some had been there for weeks. Mechanics had already stripped useful parts, instruments, radios, control cables. Nobody had touched the cannons. They were aircraft weapons. No mounting points on PT boats. No doctrine for installation. No official approval. Lynch stood next to a P-39 with its nose buried in coral. The 37mm cannon protruded from the propeller hub, like a steel finger. He calculated the mathematics. 150 rounds per M in Ute. 30 round magazine, automatic fire. He looked back toward the water, where PT-48 waited at dock. 3 mechanics from his crew were watching him. They knew what he was thinking. At 1400 hours that afternoon, Lynch approached Commander Alan Calvert, commanding officer of Squadron 3. There were no forms for this request, no procurement system, no official channels, just a simple question and desperate need. By 1630, 4 PT boat crews walked Henderson Field with cutting torches and wrenches. They had until nightfall. The Oldsmobile M4 cannon weighed 213 pounds without ammunition. The hydraulic recoil system added another 40 pounds. The feed mechanism another 30 pounds. Total weight of a complete gun assembly from a P-39 era Cobra, approximately 280 pounds. PT-48 was an Elco 80-foot boat, with a wooden hull constructed from 2 layers of 1-inch mahogany planking. The deck was 3/4-inch plywood over oak frames based on 2-foot centers. Navy engineers had calculated maximum deck loading for 50 caliber machine gun turrets. Nobody had calculated loading for a 280-pound automatic cannon firing 150 rounds per minute. Technical Sergeant James Coogan had maintained P-39 aircraft at Selfridge Field in Michigan. Before the war, October 1942 found him assigned to Henderson Field as an aircraft armorer. He knew every bolt and hydraulic line in an Airacobra cannon assembly. When Lynch's crew arrived at Henderson Field that afternoon, Coogan was the first man they found. The first P-39 they approached had taken a 20mm cannon round through the cockpit 3 weeks earlier. The pilot had died on impact. Nobody had moved the wreck. Coogan crawled into the nose section with a wrench set and cutting torch. The M4 cannon was mounted to the aircraft's engine reduction gear housing with 8 high-tensile steel bolts. Each bolt required a 15/16-inch socket. Coogan had a 3/4-inch socket, close enough in wartime. Removing the cannon required disconnecting the hydraulic recoil lines, the charging cable, the ammunition feed chute, and the firing solenoid wiring, then cutting through the engine mount. The work took 2 hours per aircraft. They had 6 hours of daylight remaining. Lynch detailed 8 men to the job, 2 men per wreck. 4 cannons by nightfall, if everything went perfectly. Nothing went perfectly. The second P-39 had been sitting in tropical heat for 11 days. Hydraulic fluid had congealed in the recoil system. The charging cable had corroded. When Coogan's team tried to remove the cannon, the mounting bolts had seized from heat expansion. They needed penetrating oil. Henderson Field had no penetrating oil. They used aviation gasoline and waited 20 minutes. The bolts came loose barely. By 1730 hours, they had removed 3 complete M4 cannon assemblies from wrecked Airacobras. Each cannon lay on the coral beside Henderson Field's runway apron. Coogan inspected the mechanisms. The first cannon's hydraulic recoil cylinder showed a hairline crack, unusable. The second cannon's feed mechanism had a bent pawl, repairable with a file in 30 minutes. The third cannon was pristine. Peepboats had no mounting points designed for aircraft cannons. Chief Machinist Mate Donald Frey solved that problem. Frey operated Henderson Field's machine shop in a corrugated metal shed near the runway. The shop had a lathe, a drill press, and an acetylene torch. Frey designed a pedestal mount from available materials. The mount consisted of a circular steel plate welded to a rotating collar. The collar was machined from a salvaged aircraft wheel hub. Bronze bushings from damaged landing gear provided smooth rotation. The entire assembly bolted to PT-48's deck through 4 reinforcing plates installed below deck level. The installation took all night. Mitchell, PT-48's gunner, fired the weapon at first light, 30 rounds into Henderson Field's target range. The gun functioned perfectly. The mount held. The deck survived. At 22:15 on the 21st of October, PT-48 departed Tulagi Harbor on patrol. Lynch commanded, Mitchell manned the new 37mm cannon. The boat carried 6 horseshoe magazines, 180 rounds total. Their mission was to intercept Japanese barge traffic between Cape Esperance and Cochabamba. At 23:52, radar contact. 3 vessels, bearing 285 degrees, range 4,000 yards. Lynch increased speed to 25 knots and closed the distance. At 1,500 yards, he identified the targets, 3 Daihatsu barges in column formation. Each barge approximately 50 feet long, displacing 20 tons, carrying troops and supplies to Japanese forces on Guadalcanal. Lynch positioned PT-48 for a beam attack, range 400 yards. Mitchell opened fire with the 37mm cannon. Automatic fire, 150 rounds per minute. The first magazine emptied in 20 seconds. The high explosive rounds had been designed to destroy light aircraft structures. Thin aluminum magnesium components. The rounds worked even better against quarter-inch steel plate armor on Japanese barges. Each round that penetrated created a 12-inch hole and sprayed shrapnel through the interior. The lead barge caught fire immediately. Fuel tanks exploded. The barge broke in half and sank within 90 seconds. Mitchell reloaded and engaged the second barge. 30 more rounds, 20 more seconds. The second barge listed to starboard and began taking water. Japanese troops jumped overboard. The barge sank in 3 minutes. The third barge attempted to escape in darkness. Mitchell fired a final magazine. 10 rounds struck the fleeing vessel. The barge exploded and disappeared beneath black water. Mitchell had fired 90 rounds from the 37mm cannon. 3 magazines. The gun had not jammed. The mount had not failed. The deck had not collapsed. 2 Japanese barges were destroyed. 1 barge was disabled. 0 American casualties. Lynch radioed Commander Calvert at Tulagi. The transmission was brief. The salvaged aircraft cannon worked. It worked better than anyone had expected. By 03:00 hours, every PT boat commander in Squadron 3 was demanding an M4 cannon for his boat. The problem was, Henderson Field only had 23 wrecked Airacobras. Squadron 3 had 12 operational PT boats. The mathematics did not work. By the 23rd of October, 3 more PT boats had 37mm cannons mounted on their bows. PT-40, PT-46, and PT-60. Crews stripped 5 more wrecked Airacobras at Henderson Field. The salvage operation became systematic. Teams knew which bolts to remove first, which hydraulic lines to disconnect, which electrical connectors to cut. The second cannon removal took 90 minutes. The third took 70 minutes. By the fourth, they had reduced the time to 55 minutes. The pedestal mounts improved with each installation. Chief Frey refined the design after examining PT-48's mount following the first combat action. The rotating collar showed excessive wear. The bearing surfaces had scored from the gun's recoil forces. Frey added bronze bushings salvaged from damaged aircraft wheel assemblies. The bushings reduced friction. The second-generation mounts rotated smoothly under combat loading. Ammunition supply became the immediate bottleneck. Henderson Field's armory had horseshoe magazines for P-39 aircraft. Each magazine held 30 rounds, but the magazines were designed for aircraft combat. Aerial engagements lasted seconds. PT boat actions against barges could last 20 minutes or more. Mitchell had fired 90 rounds in PT-48's first engagement. The boat carried 6 magazines, 180 rounds total. Not enough. Aviation ordnance personnel at Henderson Field loaded magazines around the clock. Each magazine required hand, loading 30 rounds individually. The process took 8 minutes, per magazine if the loader worked fast. The ammunition bay had 4 loaders working 12 horse shifts. They produced approximately 40 magazines per Dalton Y4 PT boats. Each carrying 6 magazines required 24 magazines per Pascal troll. The boats ran 2 patrols per night. The mathematics barely worked. The high explosive rounds proved devastatingly effective against Daihatsu barges. The rounds were designed to destroy light aircraft structures, thin aluminum, magnesium components. The rounds worked even better against quarter-inch steel plate armor on Japanese barges. Each round that penetrated created a 12-inch hole and sprayed shrapnel through the interior. 2 or 3 hits could disable a barge. 5 to 8 hits would sink it. PT-40 engaged 3 barges off Kimbo Bay on the 24th of October. The boat's newly installed M4 cannon destroyed 2 barges in the first magazine. 30 rounds, 20 seconds of firing, both barges burning and sinking within 2 minutes. The third barge escaped in darkness, but radio intercepts suggested it took damage. Squadron 3 was learning that the 37mm cannon changed PT boat tactics fundamentally. Before the cannon, PT boats attempted to use torpedoes at long range, 800 to 1,000 yards. The torpedoes missed shallow, draft barges. The PT boats withdrew. With the cannon, PT boats could close to 400 yards and destroy barges with direct fire. The closer range increased danger from Japanese return fire, but eliminated the problem of torpedoes passing underneath targets. Japanese commanders noticed the change immediately. Radio intercepts from the 25th of October indicated Japanese barge crews were reporting PT boats with heavy cannon and explosive shells. One intercepted message used the phrase, "demon boats with aircraft guns." The psychological impact was significant. Japanese barge crews had operated with relative impunity for weeks. Now they were being destroyed before they could deliver supplies. By the 1st of November 1942, 8 PT boats in Squadron 3 operated with salvaged 37mm cannons. Henderson Field had been stripped of every usable M4 cannon from wrecked P-39 aircraft. 21 cannons total had been removed. 17 were in service on PT boats. 4 were held as spares for maintenance. The maintenance requirements were substantial. The M4 cannon was designed for aircraft service with extensive ground crew support between missions. PT boats operated for days at forward bases with minimal maintenance facilities. Salt water corroded the hydraulic recoil systems. Tropical heat degraded rubber seals. Coral dust abraded the feed mechanisms. Gunners' mates learned to field, strip and maintain the weapons with improvised tools. Technical Sergeant Coogan transferred from Henderson Field to Tulagi in early November specifically to support PT boat cannon maintenance. He established a small workshop in a corrugated metal shed near the PT boat dock. The workshop had a workbench, a vise, and basic hand tools. Coogan trained PT boat gunners' mates on cannon disassembly, cleaning, and reassembly. The training took 3 days, per M-AIN. By mid-November, every PT boat with a cannon had at least 1 crew member who could maintain it. The success of the field modification reached higher commands quickly. Commander Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron, South Pacific reviewed after action, reports from Squadron 3. 8 patrols, 23 Japanese barges engaged, 14 barges destroyed, 6 barges damaged, 3 barges escaped. 0 PT boats lost in those actions. The 37mm cannon proved itself statistically. On the 18th of November, Commander Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron South Pacific sent a dispatch to Bureau of Ordnance in Washington. The dispatch was classified confidential. It detailed the field modification, described the combat results, requested official approval for the installation, and formal procurement of M4 cannons for PT boat use. The request included technical drawings of the pedestal mount design, ammunition consumption data, maintenance requirements, everything needed for institutional adoption. Bureau of Ordnance received the dispatch on the 23rd of November. The bureaucratic process that followed would normally take months. Design review, safety analysis, procurement planning, production scheduling. But the combat results from Guadalcanal were undeniable. PT boats with 37mm cannons were destroying Japanese barges at unprecedented rates. The field modification worked. On the 7th of December 1942, exactly 1 year after Pearl Harbor, Bureau of Ordnance authorized production of standardized pedestal mounts for M4 cannons on PT boats. The mount would be manufactured by a contractor in Rhode Island. Initial production run 100 units. Delivery timeline 90 days. But PT boats in the South Pacific needed the cannons immediately, not in 90 days. The solution came from an unexpected source. New Caledonia served as a major supply depot for South Pacific operations. In November, a cargo ship arrived carrying replacement parts for damaged P-39 fighters. The shipment included 12 complete M4 cannon assemblies, new, factory fresh, still packed in cosmoline preservative. The cannons were intended for aircraft repair. PT boat commanders wanted them instead. The requisition process became creative. Officially, the cannons were signed out for P-39 maintenance at Henderson Field. Unofficially, they never reached Henderson Field. A Catalina flying boat transported the cannons directly to Tulagi. By the 20th of December, Squadron 6 was installing the new cannons on their boats. No salvage required, no cutting torches, no makeshift mounting, just proper installation using the improved pedestal mount design. The difference between salvaged and new cannons was immediately apparent. Salvaged cannons from Henderson Field showed wear. Hydraulic seals degraded. Feed mechanisms damaged in crashes. Barrel rifling worn from combat use. The new cannons from New Caledonia were pristine. Hydraulic systems operated smoothly. Feed mechanisms cycled perfectly. The cannons performed exactly as designed. By January 1943, 24 PT boats operating in the Solomon Islands had 37mm cannons. Squadron 3 with 8 boats, Squadron 6 with 12 boats, Squadron 2 with 4 boats. The barge-busting capability spread across the entire PT boat force in the South Pacific. Japanese supply operations faced systematic destruction. Combat reports from January documented the impact. 37 PT boat patrols engaged Japanese barges. 41 barges destroyed. 19 barges damaged. 8 barges escaped. The 37mm cannon gave PT boats offensive capability they never had with torpedoes alone. More importantly, PT boat losses decreased. September through November, Squadron 3 lost 6 boats. December through February, with cannons installed, 2 boats lost. Neither loss was attributed to barge engagements. The tactical doctrine evolved rapidly. PT boats learned to attack barges in pairs. One boat would close to 400 yards and engage with the 37mm cannon. The second boat would provide suppressive fire with 50 caliber machine guns and stand by for torpedo shots if larger vessels appeared. Ammunition consumption became predictable. An average barge engagement required 2 to 3 magazines, 60 to 90 rounds. Complete destruction of a Daihatsu barge required approximately 40 to 50 hits, depending on where the rounds struck. Fuel tanks, engine compartments, troop areas. Each vulnerability produced different results. Crews learned to aim for specific target points to maximize effectiveness. The total number of Japanese vessels destroyed by PT boats with 37mm cannons exceeded 800 confirmed kills. Barges, small freighters, patrol boats, sub-chasers, landing craft. The majority were barges. Daihatsu class barges carried 60 troops or 8 tons of supplies. 800 barges destroyed meant 48,000 troops that never reached their destinations or 6,000 tons of ammunition and food that never arrived. Japanese commanders acknowledged PT boat effectiveness in post-war interviews. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita commanded naval forces in the Philippines. His staff kept records of supply losses. November 1944 through January 1945. Japanese forces in Leyte lost 73% of barge convoys to PT boat attacks. The losses crippled Japanese defensive operations. Troops on Leyte received 30% of planned supplies. The rest burned in barges destroyed by 37mm cannon fire. The weapon that PT boat crews salvaged from crashed fighters at Henderson Field became standard armament across dozens of small craft classes. The innovation succeeded because it solved a real tactical problem with available resources. Japanese barges carried troops and supplies. American torpedoes could not hit them. PT boat crews needed a weapon that could. Wrecked aircraft at Henderson Field provided that weapon. The crews simply connected the need to the solution. Commander Alan Calvert authorized the first cannon installation without higher approval. He took institutional risk. If the mount had failed and killed crew members, Calvert would have faced court-martial. If the installation had damaged PT-48's hull, he would have answered for destroyed Navy property. He authorized it anyway because his boats needed to survive. The results justified his decision. Bureau of Ordnance deserves recognition for responding appropriately. When Commander Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron, South Pacific, sent the dispatch in November 1942 detailing the field modification, Bureau of Ordnance could have rejected it. Unauthorized modification, non-standard installation, liability concerns. Instead, they evaluated the combat results. 14 barges destroyed in 8 patrols. 0 PT boat losses. The data was compelling. The 37mm cannon became the most successful field. Modified weapon adopted by the Navy during World War II, other modifications included radar installations, rocket launchers, and radio equipment. But none had the same direct combat impact. None went from salvage components to factory standard equipment as quickly. None proved as consistently effective across multiple theaters. Lieutenant Robert Lynch survived the war. He commanded PT-48 through the entire Solomon Islands campaign. 15 months of combat operations, 47 patrols, 19 confirmed kills. He received the Navy Cross for actions in November 1942. The citation specifically mentioned the innovation of mounting aircraft cannons on PT boats. Lynch returned to civilian life in Philadelphia, worked as an electrical engineer, died in 1978. He never spoke publicly about the cannon modification. Technical Sergeant James Coogan transferred from Henderson Field to Tulagi and spent the remainder of the war maintaining PT boat cannons. He trained over 200 gunners' mates on M4 and M9 maintenance procedures. After the war, Coogan remained in the Air Force, retired as a master sergeant in 1962. Chief Machinist Mate Donald Frey designed the original pedestal mount in Henderson Field's machine shop. His crude design became the basis for factory production mounts manufactured 18 months later. The innovation transcended the specific weapon. Innovation in combat requires commanders willing to take risk, crews willing to experiment, higher headquarters willing to evaluate results over doctrine. The bureaucratic system that approved the 37mm cannon in 18 months was remarkable not because 18 months was fast, but because the system approved it at all. These sailors turned crashed fighters into naval weapons. What made them effective was crew ingenuity, the willingness to adapt, to improvise, to take salvage aircraft parts and make them work on boats. That spirit defined PT boat operations throughout the war. Japanese commanders called PT boats Devil Boats and Green Dragons. The names reflected respect earned in combat. PT boats operating at night, attacking from unexpected directions, destroying supply convoys. The 37mm cannon amplified that effectiveness. The weapon gave PT boats offensive capability that matched their tactical mobility. The tactical innovation spread beyond PT boats during the war. Landing craft began mounting 37mm cannons for fire support missions. LCI gunboats carried multiple M9 cannons. LCS support craft used them for anti-aircraft and surface fire. The weapon that PT boat crews salvaged from crashed fighters at Henderson Field became standard armament across dozens of small craft classes. By early 1945, the strategic situation had changed completely. Japanese barge traffic in the Philippines had essentially ceased. Not because the Japanese stopped trying to move supplies, but because PT boats destroyed barges faster than the Japanese could replace them. The 37mm cannon created a tactical situation where shallow draft supply vessels could not survive. Japanese forces resorted to submarine supply runs and night flights, more expensive, less efficient, but safer than surface barges that faced systematic destruction from what Japanese radio operators continued to call demon boats with aircraft guns. The numbers told the complete story. PT boats operating from October 1942 through September 1943, without cannons, destroyed an average of 0.3 Japanese vessels per Pascal troll. PT boats operating October 1943 through August 1945 with cannons destroyed an average of 1.8 vessels per Pascal troll. 6 times more effective. The cannon made that difference. American casualties reflected the same pattern. PT boat crew losses in the Solomon Islands campaign from August through September 1942 averaged 4.2 sailors per week. October 1942 through February 1943, after cannon installation averaged 1.7 sailors per week, 60% reduction. The cannons allowed PT boats to engage at ranges where Japanese return fire was less effective. Post-war analysis by the Navy's Bureau of Ships examined PT boat effectiveness across all theaters. The analysis covered 1942 through 1945, 4 years of combat operations, thousands of patrols, hundreds of engagements. The statistics revealed a clear pattern. PT boats equipped with 37mm cannons achieved significantly higher kill rates and lower casualty rates than boats without the weapons. The Mediterranean theater provided another test case for the weapon's effectiveness. Motor torpedo boat squadrons 22 and 29 received M9 cannons in March 1944. The Mediterranean tactical environment differed significantly from the Pacific. Narrower seas, more concentrated enemy defenses, heavier coastal artillery. But the cannon's fundamental effectiveness remained unchanged. High rate of fire, explosive rounds, devastating against lightly armored targets. Mediterranean PT boats engaged German convoys off the Italian coast throughout spring and summer 1944. The cannons proved equally effective against German vessels as they had against Japanese barges. One engagement off Anzio in April demonstrated the weapon's capability. PT-208 engaged 4 German lighters attempting to evacuate troops from the beachhead. The boat's M9 cannon destroyed 2 lighters and damaged a third in a 15-minute engagement. Total ammunition expenditure, 120 rounds. The return to the Philippines in October 1944 brought PT boats back to the same waters where the war had started for them, nearly 3 years earlier. Motor torpedo boat squadrons operated in Leyte Gulf, supporting the invasion. Japanese forces used every available vessel to move reinforcements. Barges, small freighters, fishing boats, anything that could carry troops or supplies. PT boats with 37mm cannons systematically destroyed this traffic. November 1944 statistics from Leyte operations documented the cannon's cumulative impact. 6 PT boats on patrol. 87 Japanese vessels engaged. 63 vessels destroyed. 19 vessels damaged. 5 vessels escaped. The PT boats achieved these results with minimal losses. 2 boats damaged by coastal artillery. 0 boats lost to surface action. The Japanese adapted their tactics in response to the cannon threat. Barge convoys began traveling with destroyer escorts. The destroyers would engage PT boats at long range with 5-inch guns while the barges scattered. PT boats could not fight destroyers effectively. The 37mm cannon was devastating against barges, but ineffective against destroyers with 3-inch armor plate. Squadron commanders requested heavier weapons, 40mm Bofors guns, 3-inch deck guns, anything that could engage destroyers. but those weapons weighed substantially more than the M4 cannon. Installation required major structural modifications to PT boat hulls. The modifications would take months and require boats to return to stateside shipyards. Not practical during active combat operations. The compromise was improved ammunition. Bureau of Ordnance developed a new armor, piercing round for the 37mm cannon. The round used a tungsten carbide penetrator designed to defeat light armor at close range. Not sufficient for destroyer armor, but effective against the armor on Japanese patrol boats and subchasers. The new rounds reached Tulagi in February 1943. Limited quantities, 60 rounds per boat, reserved for encounters with armored targets. Production numbers reflected the weapon's success. Colt manufactured over 1,500 M9 cannons between August 1943 and August 1945. Not all went to PT boats. Some equipped landing craft. Some went to patrol craft. Some to coastal defense installations. But PT boats received priority allocation because combat results justified it. The boats needed the weapons. The weapons worked. The institutional response deserves examination. Military organizations typically resist field modifications. Unauthorized equipment creates maintenance problems. Non-standard installations complicate logistics. Safety concerns multiply, liability increases. The institutional preference is always for controlled development and approved procurement. But combat does not wait for procurement cycles. The contrast with other services is instructive. The Army rejected dozens of field modifications during World War II because they deviated from approved doctrine. Tank crews welded additional armor, forbidden. Infantry units modified weapons, prohibited. Engineers improvised bridge designs, unauthorized. The Navy, particularly in the Pacific, showed greater flexibility. If the modification worked in combat, it often received official approval. The 37mm cannon on PT boats followed none of the standard procurement steps. It began with desperate crews, cutting guns from crashed aircraft, welding crude mounts from scrap steel, testing the concept in combat, proving effectiveness through results. Only then did official channels respond. The timeline from first combat use to factory installation was 18 months. October 1942 to January 1944. By bureaucratic standards, remarkably fast. By combat standards, painfully slow. PT boat crews in the Solomons needed the weapons in October 1942. They got them by building the weapons themselves. Official approval came after the innovation had already proven itself. The innovation succeeded because it solved a real tactical problem with available resources. Coogan kept detailed maintenance logs from his time at Tulagi. Those logs documented every cannon removed from wrecked aircraft, every modification made, every combat malfunction and repair. The logs survived and reside in the National Archives. They provide a complete technical record of how salvaged aircraft weapons became standard naval armament. The logs reveal the mundane reality behind the innovation. Hydraulic seals that failed in salt water. Feed mechanisms that jammed from coral dust. Recoil springs that weakened in tropical heat. Each problem required a solution. Each solution required improvisation. The accumulated knowledge of dozens of gunners' mates, machinists, and armorers made the weapons reliable enough for sustained combat operations. Lynch never received formal recognition for conceiving the original modification. The Navy Cross citation mentioned his leadership during combat operations, but not his role in developing the weapon system that made those operations successful. Military bureaucracy rarely recognizes the individual who thinks differently. It recognizes the results that follow. The psychological impact on Japanese forces was documented in post-war prisoner interrogations. Barge crews reported that PT boat attacks changed from harassment to systematic destruction after October 1942. The The sound of automatic cannon fire became associated with certain death. Many Japanese supply missions were abandoned when PT boats appeared on radar, before any shots were fired. One captured Japanese naval officer described PT boat tactics as impossible to counter. Small, fast boats appearing from darkness, destroying entire convoys with explosive shells, disappearing before defensive fire could be organized. The 37mm cannon gave PT boats the offensive punch to match their tactical mobility. By August 1945, Japan surrendered. 531 PT boats had served during World War II. 99 were lost to enemy action, accidents, or weather. 432 survived. Nearly all of them carried 37mm cannons. The weapon that began as field improvisation had become defining armament. The final statistic that matters most: 800 Japanese vessels destroyed by improvised weapons that started as aircraft parts, lying in Henderson Field coral. Real innovation, real impact, real people who refused to accept that the impossible was impossible.